both of you. It's really inspiring and impactful work, and also stories that we can really work with. I think Victor told me a little bit about the background, and I think there's a really interesting kind of just brief story to start out with that I know the first thing I did, both my daughters are really interested in education, want to be teachers, and so I showed it to them, and they go, wow, you work with those folks? That's amazing. But then they didn't quite understand how the high school footage fit with the other, and the story there I think is really important for us all to hear. So maybe to start, we could tell us a little bit about, what's the relationship between that amazing footage and, when you were 14 and the way the film was created.
Well, first off, I just want to start by thanking. Everyone that's here. I know that people show up because they're really interested in this kind of what's going on in the state of education and trying to figure out how do we help those kids that have been left behind. And so that's important. That first step is to have these kinds of community conversations. And so if the story, I sit there a lot of times and I'm just like, oh man, I don't want to see this anymore. But if it inspires,
This was the first time he sat through the whole film.
I always run away and just go hide in the corner, and then when it's over, I come ask questions. But all to say that these, if a story, if that vulnerability of the story kind of allows community to come together and say, okay, based on this story or that story, what can we do? Then it's worth telling that story. So thank you all for being here. And then I just want to acknowledge that both Rebeca and I have two incredible administrators, and it's kind of a once in a probably long time that this is going to happen, right? That the matchup is there, where you have two, both in social science and education, administrators that get it, and that understand and that support this kind of work. And so I want to acknowledge them, because this kind of work sometimes is not acknowledged in academia, right? It's like, oh, that's just, I don't know, just outreach. And not that we did it to get credit in academia, but for Jeff Milem, Dean Milem to say, hey, we're gonna, we just got a random email. It's like, hey, it'll be part of the Dean's lecture series. So that was an incredible thing. Thank you for that. And then for Dean Hale to be like, you know what, I want to see how we can build more faculty in social sciences and in education, collaborate, so we do more work like this in the community. So, I just want to acknowledge you two for that great work that you do. But in terms of the footage, I'll make it quick. So when I was in high school, it was 25 years after Brown versus Board of Education. So PBS went out and filmed for a whole year, filmed my high school, because we had been desegregated, 25 years before that, and pretty much showed a film on national TV on Frontline that pretty much showed the disaster of desegregation, right? So the white kids were scared, and their parents were scared, and the brown kids were gangbangers, and that was the one scene where I was fighting. That was the one scene of me in the original film. And then the black kids were scary, and they wouldn't take their hoodies off. You saw that debate he was having, and you saw how Ms. Russ was like, keep it on. But the other teachers were terrified of him because he had a hoodie on. They wanted him kicked out of school. Jamal, kick him out because he's got a hoodie on. It was ridiculous, right? A ridiculous film. So PBS was like, a few years ago, was like, hey, can we do something on your book and what you do? And I'm like, no, I don't mess with PBS. What you did to me. And they're like, what? We don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, go look for your footage. There's some footage. And then they went and saw the film. They were like, wait, we filmed you? Like, you filmed me for like 200 hours and you just showed 10 seconds of me like getting dragged away by a cop. And I was mad and I was like, I don't mess with PBS. And then, so they're like, let's make it better. And PBS committed to this project. And this is how it was born. So they went and found the footage in San Francisco in some lady's basement. She was getting ready to throw it away. Some producer's basement, and somehow there was a connection where they found it and they pulled it out and went through a few hundred hours of footage, and that's how they got all that old footage.
I wonder, one of the other things that that really struck me about the film this time was that it really started, well, you all started in the classroom, you met in the classroom, and it really started as teachers, and then became later scholars who studied education. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about how, and maybe start with Rebecca, about how your experience as a teacher really kind of connects with what then eventually you're doing here, but also what the film portrays. How does a teacher stay with you as we move on through the years?
Wow. So yeah, I started my career teaching in the 6th grade classroom, which was the hardest, best, most rewarding job I think I've ever done. And I don't think I would be here today and be able to write papers and teach classes without the kind of experiences I had on the field with the real hard work. That was hard work. So I credit, where I am today to those experiences in the classroom. And I think so much about, even at Berkeley in my teacher credential program, reading articles about those kids, and always leaving class crying, because I felt like you're talking about my people and the kids I'm working with. And so there was such a disconnect with what I was doing in the classroom with the kids from what was actually happening in my theory classes in Berkeley. And so part of my passion now is working with undergrad students and thinking about education, thinking about future teachers and what that means. I think back to the film where Dr. Raja, he was Victor's student, but Victor brought him home a couple days after I gave birth to twins. And he said, hey, I really want you to meet one of my students. His parents want him to be a doctor. He has a lot of pressure, but he really wants to be a teacher. Can you talk to him? And I'm like, right? And of course I said, absolutely. And I talked to him about the love I had for the classroom, even after giving birth to twins. And I said, when I go back in a couple months, please come shadow me, or come see my classroom, see what it's like. And what, there's parts of the film doesn't capture. He came to my classroom, he was there, he saw, and he was like, this is what I want to do. I know this solidified, I want to be a teacher. And now, he was principal of the year, teacher of the year.
California Teacher of the Year for CTA.
Yeah. So he followed his dream. And if you think back to that scene where he's teaching that math class, there's 2 minutes of film where I feel like I could have watched that in my 2 years at Berkeley and learned more from that scene. Those kids walked into the classroom, and he didn't kick them out. He didn't punish them. He didn't sit them in the back of the room. He said, how y'all doing? And they sat down, and they raised their hand, and they were engaged, and they were participating throughout that little math lesson he did. And so all the various, things we learn about teacher-student interaction. How do we interact with kids? How do we show authentic caring the way Angela Valenzuela writes about? You can see it in that scene. He's talking to the kids and he's saying, you got it? Are you okay? And so just the sense of community he built within that one scene shows the power that we have as teachers. And he connected the way you connected the four of us. And so that tells us that we can all do that. We can make those connections. We can make students feel like they belong, like they're loved, like they're respected. Doesn't mean we don't have high expectations. I think it's Noddings that writes about high expectations and high love, high support. How do you have both? Because you need both. And you can see he loved those kids and he respected them, and he also had high expectations for them to learn math. He wasn't going to let them slide. So I think finding that balance is something that I think that I'm most proud of. I'm proud of a lot of things in the movie, but I think that's something that I want teachers to see and know and understand.
I think when we work with educators, we always say, and also do this work in law enforcement too, always say you gotta change the incentive system, right? So like, you're giving teachers incentives for the wrong things, you gotta give them autonomy, don't make them teach, 6 classes a day, give them autonomy, cut those classes to 3 classes a day, people are like, impossible. I'm like, there's something called professors, we don't teach that many classes a day, and we have autonomy, and there's so much creativity that comes from that, right? And so I think that there's a way in which we have to provide the right incentives in the education context is autonomy, giving educators autonomy, like in Silicon Valley, these people creating incredible gadgets that we use every day, like the iPhone. They go interview them and they're like, oh, what was the biggest kind of indicator of success for creating the best, technology out there? Autonomy, like you walk into the office space 2 hours a day and then you leave and no one's like watching over you. And you think, well, that's too much, just freedom, but this is what allows people to have the creativity to turn around, come back and make change, right? And create amazing things. And then with law enforcement, what we always say is, in this one paper we've been working on for a while now, we talk about the incentive system is that, you're a tough cop, or you get promoted, right? You get sergeant, you move up. And then the cop that's also doing outreach with the kids, like what we were doing, which is the cop version of it, or very community engaged. Cops have a term for that cop. It's the hug-a-thug, And so like we have to change that. Like that community cop needs to be promoted, right? And so then others see, oh, I get a promotion for doing that kind of work. I'm gonna do that kind of work. Same thing here, right? Like the promotion system, the sort of like, oh, you're a great teacher. Oh, you get this little award, but you still got to publish 10 books. Oh, you're doing outreach. Good for you, pat on the back. But you still got to put out 25 articles before we give you training. And so that balance, of course, you should do good research, but how do you balance it out so that people feel like it's just about me and how many articles I could produce that 3 or 4 people will read? No, and that's real, right? Or more like, can I produce some solid empirical work that will go along with this outreach work? And the outreach work is valued in a way where many of us can collectively come together. So I think that's the key, is changing the incentive system for folks so that we're not kind of doing this rat race where it's about just us. And then one project we're working on along with other colleagues in the room is this publicly engaged scholarship initiative that will turn into a center eventually. And so that would be a hub on campus for folks that are doing public engaged work to come and sort of collaborate and have resources, hopefully like a workspace. And so that's something we're kind of gearing up to do.
Can we, what do you think about the assertion that what you're doing with the program that was being depicted there, where it's really about trying to understand how education works and doesn't work, and about push-outs and why our system creates push-outs. But it was also like working with this amazing kind of experience, getting kids to tell their story and so forth. And so it was a combination of creation of new knowledge and also being engaged and doing stuff. And I guess I feel like, I mean, isn't it the case that most of what you would call real insights in your scholarship come from that space, as opposed to, I mean, or the inspiration? I mean, would you say that that's, because that's one way that we can develop more, an answer to Jeff's question. But if you could talk a little bit about how does the work, like in this program in Watts, how does that relate to what you all have done in your scholarly work that's related to the same questions you were working on?
I guess I'll start off with this, because it made me think a lot about Ana Medrano, who was the social worker in the film, and she was an Education 199 RA research assistant of mine when she first transferred here from community college. And it was her like maybe 4th day of transferring, and she interviewed for the position. And she's like, I only have 2 years here. I've got to make the most of it. She was so ready, so hungry, and she participated in all of the research that I had going on, and ended up applying the MSW program and got in and became a social worker. So she was one of the first people that we thought of, right? We're like, oh, who in a heartbeat, all these people volunteered their time. No one was paid, we weren't paid. They did it because they cared. They wanted to do a project like this. And she took off time from work to do this. So when I think about scholarship and training undergrad students or graduate students in research and how to conduct research and what it means, not just to write, but to be in the field and to work with mothers, to work with daughters, to work with children, parents, families, teachers, and to be a part of that and live that, and be able to balance that and write about it, is part of the reason why I love this job. But I think teaching us, ourselves, and then our students on how to be reflexive and how to think about what we're doing, and our positionality, right, as researchers, as trying to get tenure, full professor, that rat race we're going through, how to balance that, and to remind our students and ourselves why we're doing the kind of work we're doing.
I don't know if that work in the community engaged work, has provided me, allowed me to create more quality research, but it has helped me see, when I'm reading other people's research, just seeing the BS in that research sometimes, right? Because it's like, I was just there, what are you talking about? It's like, I spent a lot of weekends at juvenile facilities in LA, and I'll come back, and I ran into a former student there that was a social worker inside, and she's like, why are you still doing research? Why are you still here? Aren't you an expert? And I'm like, well, no, I'm not. I don't like that word, right? It's like, because the minute you call yourself an expert, you're like, that's a sedimented identity. It's like, okay, now I can tell you forever, from this point forward, right, forever, what people are going through. And in reality, people, the people, right, in different communities, even if you were just there, you know, they're always changing and things are always changing. So for example, juvenile facilities are decarcerating right now. So like I used to go to these facilities to be like 200 kids. Same facility now, it's like 20 kids. You know, where are the kids? On the streets with probation officers, and then technologies of surveillance and control now. So it's a different project now. How do you incarcerate people when they're on the outside now, right? And then now community colleges are also taking a lot of the formerly incarcerated, and they're trying to figure out what to do, and professors, faculty there are scared of what do we do with them? Just teach them, and what do you mean what do you do with them? So like, you know, that's another project. So society changes, and then we tend to think, we did a study, and it was seminal, and we've gotten 1,000 citations for it, so therefore, we can tell you forever, from this point forward forever, that we know that area, but in reality, like social science, like people change, society changes, and you gotta be there consistently and constantly. So we've done a lot more projects like this. It just happens to have been caught on video, right? And then people ask us, and we're like, oh yeah, that's right. You know, back then we were working on the mind, body, soul kind of framework, and now we have all these other kind of frameworks we operate under. But yeah, so all to say that that it does inform us, you know, because it does help us see kind of how to be more reflexive about the when we actually do, and particularly for me when I write my research up, I got to be really reflexive of how I label people. You know, all this time I've been like, oh, let's not cause youth at risk, let's call them I promise, and people are like, whoa, that's so novel. But you go and see the movie, and Miss Russ is telling people, we're not going to call anyone at risk, right? And so like, people on the ground can theorize a lot better than us as academics, but then we show up with some fancy word, like, wow, you wrote about that? Yeah.
So back to the question that they had about creating a culture that acknowledges just intertraditional issues and stuff. You said that you would change the incentives that you give towards teachers, right, and increase their autonomy in order for them to be able to reach back towards the non-traditional issues that need to be covered, right? And then you said that, but you also said that in order to take it, you would need to reduce 6 periods in order to 3. So my thought process went towards like high school, you know what I mean, and increasing the autonomy with teachers within high school, right? But then if you increase the autonomy within high school, then how do you mitigate the challenges that are posed by the state standard tests? And so changing the incentives, right, is good, but how do we mitigate the other side of the educational system?
Yeah, and I think it was a thought experiment. Yeah, but if you like turn that thought experiment into a policy kind of framework, then you do have to go top down and bottom up. So top down would be getting kind of at the top level of the state to change policy so that educators have more time. You know, a lot of times we think, look, for sure teachers need to get more pay. They're the lowest pay in relation to how much education they have, you know, in society. And so the teachers need more pay for sure. And then you can clap it up for the teachers for sure, you know, because they do need more pay. And at the same, and they need more resources to support the students. And they need to be released. But when they're released, like what I'm talking about, that thought experiment, right, is like they better come back, right, and the work they do by the end of the year should have been some of this social emotional development work. So it's not like, oh, we're going to release you, go to the spa. But wait a minute, maybe the spa will help me later on tonight go visit my students and see how they're doing at home at 8 p.m. But that's okay because I took my spa day, right? So like that human autonomy allows you that flexibility to do that kind of work, right? And it's thinking outside of that box. So as a thought experiment, yeah, it's like it doesn't match up as well when we're thinking of like, well, there's standards and there's testing and there's like also resources, and then what happens to the kids, who takes care of them? Well, then programs like this can come in and take over for those teachers while they're not teaching those periods. So a component is the academic. So the whole thing going into even the neuroscience of learning now is that, you know, the part of the brain responsible for learning is intricately tied to the part of the brain responsible for emotion. So if you want to teach me, you first have to reach me. You know, if you want me to learn, you first have to work through my emotional state. And what the problem in education for a long time is the attitude is like, we don't deal with emotion. I'm not here to be their friend. I'm here to teach them. And I always say to teachers that tell me that, I say, it's okay not to be their friend, but you have to be friendly to them, right? You have to connect with them at an emotional level, and then it can open, even in a STEM class, science, math. So yeah, so I would love to work on some policy framework that would be from the top level, and then there's some schools and principals I've worked with that have actually wanted to implement. We were working with a superintendent in Oxnard, Rio School District, elementary. He was all about this. He's like, yeah, I want to release some of my teachers and see what happens as an experiment. So this would be the research part. We think about it, we're there in the field, we see it. We think about it like, hey, Dr. Puglisi, can we do this experiment? He's like, yeah, totally. He's one of these reformists. Like, let's do it, And so we're looking for a way to, GGSE, right? Oh, he was a GGSE grad, Dr. Puglisi, yeah, and he's all about reform. And he's like, yeah, let's try it, so he wants to try it with a few of his teachers. What happens? How do their kids transform? How do their kids do on testing if maybe they're lacking, 40 minutes less of academic content, but they're getting that 40 minutes of social emotional support? Can their academic scores go up? That's an experiment for us to try, So yeah, so you're right. There's a lot of limitations that I think a little step at a time in terms of thinking about it, doing some policy, some research, and some kind of bottom up would be just trying it and see what happens. Sometimes we just try stuff, we don't even write about it. We just try it, and right? People, one thing that's really weird. People always ask us like, how do you guys work together? I could never work with my husband. I'm just like, I don't know. We fight, but our rule is we don't fight when we're working, huh? But we're not gonna fight on stage.
No comment? You got another question out there? Yes.
So I'm going back to my classroom tomorrow, and I'd really like to have, things that I can work with. So, and really, I don't know, I have some ninth graders in science that are failing out right now. And not only are they failing out in one class, they're failing out in all their classes. We've got a big gang emphasis, and they're making decisions at age 14 that are going to affect their lives forever. And yes, I am working with dignity, compassion, and respect. I'm greeting them at the door. I'm trying to make relationships. But I'm not catching all of them, and I really wish I was. So if there's something that you have that you're like, hey, try this, I'm willing to give it a try, because I really want to reach those kids, and I feel like I'm failing.
I think that you're already doing what you're you already have the answer to the question, right? Which is like that whole kind of reaching them. But the only thing is that your assumption, I think, should change a little bit. And the assumption is that in me doing all of this, I'm trying to catch them all, right? You use the word catch, and in reality, you're not gonna, you're not fishing, so you're not gonna catch them all anyway to begin with. But what's happening is that what you're doing is, we use this word in Spanish, because it's a lot more powerful, I think. You're giving the cariño, it's beyond care, right? It's you call it dignity, that's exactly it. You're giving them the cariño. And what happens when you give them that, you used the phrase earlier too by a researcher. Authentic caring. Yeah, the cariño is like deep because think of it this way, they're like, speaking of catching, I guess, let's go there. They're like oysters, right? They're only going to open up when they're ready. And some of them aren't going to be ready for a long time, right? They'll go past your class next year and they might not be ready. But the ones that are ready, when they open up, you're going to be at the door greeting them. And then you'll catch them, yeah? But the ones that are kind of not ready, as an educator, I think that you've done kind of your due diligence, right? Which is like giving them that cariño, that dignity and respect. and letting them know when they're ready, you'll be there. I think that's the most important part. Because you can't carry all that burden on your shoulder too, to change every single life there. Although it would be great if you could, you know. And I'm
Just
sure.
wish we could get them a little bit sooner, you know?
Yeah,
You know,
that's
they could,
exactly
you know,
it.
have them open up a little sooner before they goes, you know.
I really do believe that the school can be the solution for many of the issues that are a lot of marginalized communities face, and this is why. Okay, schools are located right in communities already. Schools have caring people. You talk to teachers, you know, they're like, you know, their purpose was to go help kids. That's why they signed up to be teachers, right? And I think that going back to your question is that we're in a time where there's disinvestment in education, right? And so how do we, on the one hand, be pragmatic and work with what we got, and on the other hand, push the system to pump resources back into schools and be ready for when the system does. The community colleges are a prime example. Right now, it's one of the biggest historical financial investments in the community college system in California. And reason is, there's lots of reasons, I won't even go there. But the community colleges don't know what to do with all this money. And the state said it's mandated to help the most marginalized students you have. And the community colleges are like, well, we don't know how to do it. How do you not know how to do that? You've been serving them forever. Well, we're just used to not having resources to do it. Now they do, but they don't know what to do about it. So the point is that one day, right, we keep pushing the system. We have to have a template there, examples, right? This is what we do when you bring the resources. We'll have social workers, we'll have teachers that are credentialed in both the STEM, like what's your name? Ms. Wapaya. Ms. Wapaya is now only going to teach, three classes. And but the other two is the social emotional development program. She wants to go and get credentialed in that. She comes back, and now she mixes it all together. Now the students are seeing her twice. One for the emotional work and one for the STEM work, and then eventually it becomes one. It becomes fused. And so now that financial investment from the state that understood that we needed to invest more funds for this kind of work, we have a template, we have the example for how to do it. And I think that to me is kind of a twofold battle. One is being pragmatic so we can invent the things that people are not even thinking about yet, and then pushing the system to invest enough resources so that those things can expand, those programs, those practices can expand.
So just back to the emotional development, I've been teaching, and at one of my schools, they trained us in mindfulness, and then I've been able to take that into my classes wherever I go. And so I was just wondering if you have any, if you've done any research in mindfulness and that as, a part of that academic world is thinking about emotional.
That's incredible, and I'm so excited that you had that, and I'm really curious about your experience with that, what it's like. I did a little research with a colleague, and we interviewed around 80 teachers in the district about their well-being. And one of the things we often talked about is how are teachers, how are they feeling, how are they doing? And our first interview question was, how are you? And the teachers were like who, me? Like today? Like, right, what are you talking about? And it was like we asked them something completely foreign. And teachers were like, well, I'm having a hard day. Or I'm having a great day, but they would talk about, the last period they were in, or what they're thinking about for the next period. And so, a lot of that research found that teachers that that had a better well-being, were engaged in some kind of mindfulness activity, and also had support and communication from their administration, and how their administration supported that well-being. And so I'm curious too about what you did in the classroom, and was that effective, and what was that like?
So one of the things that I found was when I was being trained, I wasn't familiar with it. So you can only lead as far as you've been taught. And so I have to keep seeking out resources, and I love hearing other people and what they do with mindfulness. I spend about 5 minutes at the start of each class, and I teach various different grade levels. And so I have kindergarten, first, and second this year, and I would do doodling and little sketches. And there's a great book that I introduced them to called The Lemonade Hurricane at the start of the year. And what's neat is when I run into parents and they tell me, oh, you're the one that does that breathing thing that he taught us last night. I'm like, he doesn't even do it in class. It's getting through to them. And then I'll have students say, yeah, I used that the other day because when I was upset at home or whatever. So trying to just give them lots of access to different things.
Yeah, and this kind of goes back to this whole pattern, what you were talking about, you never know when you're going to reach your child, or a ninth grader, or a first grader, second grader, and they seem like they're not engaged or not listening or hearing, but it may be in 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years from now that it sinks in, so.
Really quick, I think the next kind of phase to think about is we talk about restorative justice, which includes some of these kind of really incredible practices. And the next kind of thing folks are already thinking about is transformative justice, and that's to change the system. So like discipline, right? I'll ask a principal when I walk through school sometimes, I'm like, hey, what's your beanbag room? They're like, huh? They have their little the traditional detention room, but that should be converted into a beanbag room. And I'm like, what if that security guard over there where his title weren't security guard, but it would be success coach? How would so like transforming things, tweaking things so that like it's transformative of the system. So it's like in the film we talk about redeeming kids, but them redeeming themselves, but we have to redeem the system too. Like the system has to change its practices, and mindfulness is central there. And then a lot of times it's not, the assumption is the kids need to be mindful, but in reality, sometimes the teachers need to be mindful. So check yourself, be mindful, teachers, like how you label kids and how you talk about them.